People ask me what part of Mexico my family comes from. I say Texas. Both of my parents were born in Texas. In fact, my mother's grandfather settled the town that she was raised in just south of San Antonio. And they both came to Chicago as high school students with their families who had been migrant farm workers. So I often think about that in terms of being a migrant farm worker and following the crops and picking cotton and picking blueberries and picking apples. And their families, since they reached the youngest, decided they could make a lot more money in Chicago if they took factory jobs in Chicago in the 1950s. Manufacturing was a really booming industry there, and it was certainly an easier life than the life that they had been living. And then because each of them were the youngest in their families, they were still in high school. Each of my parents were still in high school when they came to Chicago, and they each then became the first in their family to finish high school. And I often think about that as them having that level of education when many people in our community and our parents and our grandparents had barely finished grade school. Set the foundation then for me being the first, literally in the 4 generations on my mother's side, to finish college, right? And because they came from farm worker families, this is the 60s and the 1970s, they were activists and they were very involved with the United Farm Workers Union. And in fact, my mother took me to my first picket line when I was 13 years old. And that really just fooled my sense and was a steep introduction into the need for justice and how inequality shows up in the world. So in addition to sort of that formation, they also got very involved in the community. And one of the stories that I tell is when Head Start was being created, my father organized people to go to the school district because there was no Spanish-speaking person to provide Head Start. And the school district said, well, we don't have the money. So my father organized community members to raise money to hire a teacher or a teacher's assistant. So they were very involved, and I think it was just an innate and intuitive for them because they had no formal training. But that really showed me how speaking up, that was the example, right, of how speaking up, you could see how differences could be made and how improvement could happen in communities. So started with that foundation. I was always an activist. I was always involved in things. But it wasn't until, through high school and through college, but it really wasn't until after college when I got a job working. Story I tell is I took a third of a cut in salary and I moved from Chicago to Springfield to have a fellowship in the governor's office. And I think about it now, I've taken salary cuts 3 times in my life, which is a little crazy. But I don't regret it because each one was just an amazing learning opportunity in terms of what I got to do with my life and my career. And my second job in Springfield after the fellowship, I worked in the governor's budget office, which was amazing training for what I do today, to really have the broad systems view of how government works and how budgets influence. Budgets really are a reflection of our values. And I walked in there and realized that every other analyst had a degree in public policy but me. And I said, what is a degree in public policy? Because I had no clue. And this is literally more than 40 years ago now, Hugo. But then that really inspired me after my time in government. It's like, well, that's the graduate degree I'm going to get because a degree in public policy gives you the tools, in my mind, for social change, the tools for how we think about equality and inequality in society, the tools for really how we can have a social impact.